Welcome everybody to this World Satsanga held on the 24th of November 2023 in conjunction with Kevin Moore and the Kevin Moore Show. And as I do every month, I encourage you to visit his YouTube channel, the Kevin Moore Show, to see what other interesting angles he's broadcasting on people who work with the greater reality. This month's lecture is all about the ego. And it's interesting because it seems that right now there's a very heavy emphasis on personal gratitude, gratification, and possession and status. So what is the ego and how does it affect our spiritual progression? Well, in human terms, the ego can be loosely recognized as a state of beingness. And that beingness can be described as, if somebody is considered to have a big ego, they are also considered to think a lot of themselves and are ambitious. These people are usually highly materialistic and not in control of their thoughts. Conversely, if someone is considered to have little ego or no ego, they are considered to be introvert or lacking in ambition. They are usually not very materialistic and are generally in control of their thoughts. In both of these cases, the ego is the controlling factor in our daily incarnate lives, the size of the ego alluding to the level of control the ego has on us. So, if the ego has control of us, what is it exactly? Well, the ego is a creation, albeit temporary. It is created as a result of an aspect or soul of our true energetic self, sometimes called the oversoul or Godhead or higher self, being separated out from the true energetic self and projected into lowest frequencies associated with our multiversal environment, to experience, learn and evolve in an accelerated way. That low frequency environment is the physical universe. So the ego only really exists in the physical universe. To experience this evolutionary acceleration, the aspect or soul must enter into these frequencies in a way that is best experienced, as if it was part of them. To do so, it needs to associate itself with a vehicle that can be animated energetically. This vehicle is, in our instance, the human form. Notice I said form and not body. It's classified as a human form because it uses 10 frequency levels to create it. 3 gross physical, 4 spiritual physical, the partially energetic condition that makes up semi-physical stroke energetic components of the human form, sometimes called the astral, and 3 energetic frequencies that allow the true energetic self to project an aspect of itself, complete with sentience, in an energetic step-down function that allows partial communication between the aspect and the true energetic self, whilst associated with the lower frequencies that make up the human form. This conditioning being in partial communication or even zero communication is what creates the ego. The zero communication is a function of full immersion in one's incarnation, whereas partial communication could be that one is self-realized in some level or form and therefore is able to communicate with the greater reality in some form. In this instance, the level of ego is more dominant in those who are almost totally fully immersed in their incarnation. Although I say zero communication, there's always some communication there, because if there wasn't any communication, the soul wouldn't be able to be still connected to the true energetic self. It's never not connected. So the ego is therefore a condition where the sentience associated with the energies, that are the aspect, the soul, associate themselves in an isolated or individualized way with the gross physical aspect of their human form, or the body. They are, in that instance, the human body. This is the totally immersed soul. The ego is a temporary or transient condition because it can only exist whilst the human form is operational, animated or alive, and when we are not self-realized. When the human form demises or dies, it dissolves, although the experiential memories of what we are whilst incarnate are not lost because they are always transmitted to the true energetic self in parallel with the experience itself. The ego can also be dissolved if we work on our spiritual development and regain contact with our true energetic self or higher self, or contact the greater reality. The ego knows this and does everything in its power to stay in control, in power or alive, for as long as it can. And so we'll work hard on arresting our spiritual progression. It's worth noting here that, in actual fact, we never totally get rid of the ego, and when we join our true energetic self in the frequencies that it exists within, the ego isn't lost, actually, because it's actually a personality, if you want to call it that. And it becomes part of the subset of a vast amount of personalities that we've created through incarnation over thousands of incarnations. So it's still there, becomes a very, very, very minor subset of what we are. So basically it does lose control, and it loses its dominance. Now then, I've said that the ego knows that it could lose control if we work on our spiritual development, and does everything in its power to stay in control or in power. And so works very hard on arresting our spiritual progression. So as incarnate aspects of our true energetic self, our main role is to become spiritually self-realized whilst incarnate, resuming communication with our true energetic self in the process, working in the physical whilst not being of the physical, navigating around our incarnation, the circumstances, individuals in those circumstances, and the environments which those individuals and circumstances are within, in a karma-free way. In this condition, there is no room for the ego, and it dissolves. The ego knows this and is patient, sly, ultimately resourceful, and can use convoluted methods to trick and fool us into thinking we've mastered it. It infuses us with feelings of self-consciousness, failure, depression, success, materialism, status, and pride. Success and pride are two emotions the ego uses with skill, because we can feel these emotions as a result of being pleased with our spiritual progress. And when it uses these to the best of its ability, we can think that we are making spiritual progress, when in fact we're not. Notice how some of the most spiritual people have the biggest egos. The very moment we think we have mastered the ego, we've lost the battle, and the ego is back in control of us and our thoughts. And we lose some of our spiritual progression. Although we don't actually go backwards, we just lose our inertia. So stay aware, stay observant, and by observing yourself in a passive and non-judgmental way, look out for the signs of the ego rising within you, then act upon it and control your spiritual progression and your goal of becoming self-realized whilst incarnate by changing the way you think, behave, and act when you see the ego changing you to low-frequency thoughts when you should be maintaining high-frequency thoughts. Well, that's a bit on the ego and how it's created and how it can affect us. Let's go into the questions and answers. So the first question is from Ulla, and there's three questions from Ulla, and there's another question, three questions from Nicole. So the first question is related to the overexpression of the third chakra, which is seen as overly aggressive or dominating, controlling, manipulating, or power-hungry traits. So this is to do with, is a root cause for narcissism in humans. It seems that many of our presidents, CEOs, leaders, and celebrities are selected and admired for such traits, particularly by people with underexpression of the third chakra, have low self-esteem, victim mentality, and are easily manipulated and controlled. It's like the old master stroke slave dynamic, or a match between givers and takers. So basically, we are attracted to individuals that have got a certain level of charisma. And you tend to find that it's those individuals who aren't so highly evolved, and backfield people come into that as well, that would in effect be attracted to these individuals because they see them as a leader, and they are. Yeah, the whole point of them being is that they're in a leadership position in this particular incarnation, and so there are sometimes the dynamic of the master and the devotee sort of thing. Although it's not the same as a guru or a teacher or a shifu or a sensei. It's a different thing altogether. This is people who are attracted to and follow without, say, individual thought processes associated with it. Next part, narcissism occurs on a spectrum like many mental health conditions. Is it written into a life plan or acquired in life? Narcissism itself is the love of oneself, and we can't love others unless we love ourselves. The issue is that sometimes that level of self-love goes into
to a completely different level, such as it becomes obsessive with our body type, with our beauty, our fitness, our status. And so, really, it's a case of narcissism can be classified as a form of karma. And if you look at the last sort of 10 or 12 years, you'll see that we've become very self aware, much more than we ever were. And you can see that people are starting to have lots of things like plastic surgery, um, and all sorts of other bodily medical procedures to make them look beautiful or to make them look like certain, say, charismatic features, individuals or characters that we see on television. The next part of this part two question is: there are many types, including overt, covert, hypervigilant, sexual, vindictive, malignant, dramatic, cerebral, and even spiritual narcissism, for example. For instance, spiritual narcissists believe their spiritual wisdom and development is superior to others, which makes them holy and special, based upon a spiritual ego that separates them from others. Yeah, and this is it. This is certainly with the spiritual side. The ego is the, without doubt, the culprit, because the ego will tell us that we've reached a certain level and we've made it. Actually, the route and the journey is never ending. We're always looking to better ourselves. We're always be humble. We should be looking with a deeper meaning. We should always try to better ourselves. So when we start to be satisfied or put ourselves on a pedestal, so to speak, and that can be in any of these other types as well that others mentioned, overt, covert, hypervigilant, sexual, malignant, dramatic, cerebral, and spiritual. All of these things basically are, if we put ourselves on a pedestal, some of these things come out. And you can see, for instance, certainly with some of the pop stars, certainly the female pop stars, they put themselves into certain categories of that as well. And you can also see that not only are they physically manifesting what these things are, they also personality trait do it as well. Question three: some say life is about exploration of frequency, though there are no right or wrong features, frequencies to choose because it's all experience. In your experience, is narcissism treatable by psycho-spiritual healing or by other means in adults? The answer to that is yes, provided the individual who's displaying one of those various different types of narcissism is in acceptance of their condition and wants to move away from it to better themselves. If they don't, no amount of psycho-spiritual healing will treat them because there isn't the underlying desire to change. If there is an underlying desire to change, then psycho-spiritual healing will help them definitely. On top of this, every experience that we have, whether it's by life plan or accident or as part of the journey through trying to fulfill some of the goals within the life plan, is an experience. And also being in the physical universe also gives us plenty of opportunity to gain karma. And overt self-love, the point of obsession, is the karmic function, as is other things like wanting to be in cyberspace all the time. That's also karma. But anything that makes us focus in a, we say, an addicted way to the physical in any way, shape, or form, a karmic reaction, i.e., we are not recognizing ourselves as a soul in a body, a vehicle, and that vehicle's here to help us navigate through this incarnation at this frequency. We're seeing ourselves as the body, and the body is what we are, and we are trying to present ourselves as being better than somebody else. Also, not only narcissistic, but it's also ego. But I hope that's answered that particular question. Some good questions there. Now, Nicole's given me 10 questions. I'm answering 3 now. I'm going to spread the rest out over the next Satsangas because, but they do link together. So hopefully I can do a little summary when we go into the next Satsanga in December. But these are all quite interesting questions as well. Can a change in frequency affect your electronics on top of your physical body or your car? Is it true that when your frequency is in flux or change, raising or lowering, that it can cause havoc with the electronic and the mechanical things around you? If so, how can we present this happening? I've had nothing but computer and car issues for 2 months. I've gone through a huge change, both energetically and physically. Was this unavoidable? Was it in lieu of my body processing? necessary, or is it simply collateral damage relating to the frequential shift? When we expose ourselves to the possibility of gaining higher frequencies, we can affect those around us that are lower frequency. And those at a lower frequency tend to be things that are mechanical or electronic. So it's quite likely that in exposing oneself in a very open case, that we can affect things energetically around us. That means that things like the internet goes wrong, for example, things like the watch stops working, things like we have electronic problems with televisions that can just turn off. Those things that we thought we were recording on television, or from an audio perspective, like music or records, can not be there. So that's because we interrupt the normal function of low frequency creativity or manifestation or beingness, basically. And that doesn't just mean us as individuals, it means that those areas of locally low frequency around us, that could be such as a chair or a bookcase behind us, or the books themselves. We can affect all of these things. We tend to see them in electronics because they are more sensitive than a chair, for example. If you very quickly though, if you look at people who do ghost hunting, they use electronics to detect any higher frequency abnormalities, such as poltergeist or other entities moving around the environment. And these electronics are based upon detecting the differences in how they are affected internally as well. Right, next question. 2. I've heard that we're like pillars of light, so when we raise our frequency, we can affect a circumference of people miles around us that affects them positively in ways that we can't understand. Is this true, or does it only affect certain people? It affects more people than others. It's true. We do have an effect. Sometimes it's not visible. Sometimes it's very subconscious. Sometimes it's very obvious. Sometimes it's obvious that we rub people the wrong way if we're a higher frequency, because their frequency is lower, and there's a level of disharmony between us. So we can affect them in the wrong way. But in essence, there is always a positive effect on the environment around us and those in which we interact with if we are a higher frequency, and we don't get dragged down into low frequency thoughts, behaviors, and actions by interacting with them. 3, are we able to raise the frequency of our family members through our own ascension process, or only through a soul contract prior to entering into this reality? How does our progress affect those in our soul group, or does it only affect those who are consciously aware of these things? Right, soul group first. Entities that are in the same soul group are projected and individualized from the same true energy itself. So as an entity that is incarnated progresses, the progression is also affecting those other souls that are part of the same soul group, and therefore part of the same true energy itself, or Godhead or oversoul. We can affect our family members like we affect everybody else. But again, it's either subliminally or subconsciously positive. Sometimes it could be dramatic. Sometimes it can be dramatic the wrong way around, so that they can bounce off us. Quite common for people to be in a family where a spiritual person, who aspirant, we understand the higher frequency, what's in the higher frequencies, can in effect be one end of the spectrum, whereas a sibling might be the other end of the spectrum as well. Somebody's very spiritual and somebody's basically a criminal in the same family. So again, there could be a soul contract as well, or a need to practice and to work with somebody in this incarnation as well. So that can also be there in the family unit or outside the family unit. And the last question here, so it's number 3 twice. I understand that we have multiple exit points in every lifetime, and our soul can choose to leave early if they decide our time is up, or when we have done what we came here for. Is that how it works? It's a bit more than that. We have about 5 termination points, but the last one, the 5th one, is where we actually do leave for good in this incarnation. The others are when we've achieved what we wanted to achieve at certain points in a life plan, and therefore we might choose to add on extra experiences to extend the life plan, or we can elect to leave the incarnation through disease or accident or something, because we've achieved what we wanted to achieve initially. So therefore, we no longer need to be here. So, and that's a choice that we make energetically. It's not a choice that we make physically. To anybody, for example, who thinks that they've reached a termination point and decides to commit suicide, is creating a lot of downstream evolutionary death. So that's not the way to go. Certainly, it's a difficult thing to understand, is that we do have these termination points where we can leave the incarnation and not affect the downstream evolution progression that we have and others have through interacting with us. Right, lots of questions coming through now. Let's have a look at it. Right, oh, anyway, I might have to do some of these at the end, and just add them on at the end. From Daniel, does Origin and Source have their own trials and tribulations? Are we the only ones in the universe, multiverse, that experience these trials and tribulations, highs and lows, difficulties and bliss? The Source and the Origin has their own challenges, clearly. We are there, we have been individualized from them as smaller individualized units of sentience to investigate and work with the minute detail of the various different aspects of the energetic environments that they both exist within. So they have their own challenges, and we support them by experiencing other challenges that they couldn't support themselves because they're too big in terms of their volume of sentience. So yes, they do. But being in a lower frequency, we experience things that are, say, more acute than they would experience, although what we experience, they also experience. Next question, what is it like to be the origin and the source relative to our experiences here on planet Earth? Does the origin and the source experience what we experience independently as themselves, or did they experience what we experienced vicariously? They experience what we experience, and it all adds up to their total experience and their total evolutionary progression. However, think of it this way. If I was the source, or you were the source, or the origin, would you know what your cells are experiencing, or the atoms that make the cell, or the electrons, the protons, neutrons that make up smaller components, and the quarks, the leptons, that make up the smaller components? Would you understand what they're experiencing? And the answer is no, but if you focused on it, if you meditated and focused on it, you probably could. But in general, they're doing their job, they're doing their experiences, but we're focused on bigger things. That's basically what's happening with the source and the origins. They experience bigger things. Okay, there's Bill. Do we experience only the first three frequencies, or presume we can access frequencies for the 12 through meditation? We focus on the first three frequencies because that's what we're supposed to do. The objective, however, is to be able to navigate around the first three frequencies without getting attracted to the addictions that could be there, karma. So we can, through meditation, contact or experience what's in the 4th through to 12th meditation, or through traversing the frequencies, you can go even higher. And the answer is yes to both those questions. Okay. Okay. Can engaging in physical sports like football negatively impact one's spiritual growth and karma? As a 17-year-old seeking spiritual improvement alongside a successful football career, is enlightenment stroke ascension on this path? When we group together, we enter into communion, and provided the communion is in a higher frequential state, then it's beneficial. So when we support a group or a team, we collect together. We are collectively together in communion, supporting that team, and we go through the trials and tribulations of them being successful and scoring goals, or them winning championships, for example. But when we're experiencing the good side, the higher frequency side, we experience it collectively as well, synergetically. If, for instance, there's negative aspects where things like violence, then that is not a good way to experience and evolve, because it's in a collective state, because then you get subsumed by it or consumed by it. So the overall answer to the question is keep good company and be in communion with good company. And any level of communion with the group has the potential to have bad company to be avoided. That's that question. Okay. Bill again, what is the nature of the higher frequency physicalities in the first dimension, the first universe? For example, are there duplicates of our solar system in frequency 4, 5, etc.? Are these physicalities similar to the physicalities in 1 to 3, our collective 1 to 3 being where we are now, gross physical? Do the same laws of physics apply? We don't understand the laws of physics, to be honest, Bill, and we only understand what we can detect and work with now, what we've worked out. There are different levels of local areas of density, such as planets and galaxies and solar systems, these sort of things, depending upon what frequency we are. So there is a level of duplication, but a higher frequency level of duplication. And they are sort of physical, but different levels of physical. So if you're in, for instance, the 6th frequency, you would experience a level of physicality that is relevant to the 6th frequency, rather than what it's like in the collective first 3 frequencies, or different to what's like in the 7th frequency. So there's different laws of physics that apply because the frequencies are higher. The different things are capable, basically, and we are capable of different things as well. So if we went into the 12th frequency level, we would see that there wouldn't be any gaps in between things like solar systems and galaxies. The whole space would be full. Whereas where we are now, we see huge gaps. And it's dark, we call it darkness, and therefore we call it dark matter, because we can't see them disappearing. We thought that the physical universe was expanding, but it's actually not. It's a Doppler effect. So, in effect, what we see is a function of what frequency we're on. And the laws of physics, if you want to call it that, would change depending on the frequential level we're in. Okay, question from Tao. I heard you mention in an interview that we have a hara cable, hara line, as well as the hara sacral chakra, and that the hara cable is a direct line to our soul. Would you say that the expression of having a gut feeling is to do with a sense of knowing that comes from our soul? Could you share some more about the difference or similar ways the hara line or hara cable and the hara sacral chakra works and how they register to our bodies? Well, the harakiri, Japanese, is based upon cutting off the hara line from the junction or clip from the location, which is where the soul, its energetic state and its sentient state, start to split into the core star, which is just behind the plexus of the solar chakra, and therefore the energies move into the Tantien, and the sentience goes into the soul seat, which is behind the heart chakra plexus. So, in effect, the chakras don't have an effect other than they pull energy in. So, although there is the hara line, which can be severed, or theoretically severed as a function of Japanese putting harakiri, in effect, what we're having is a misunderstanding of what the chakras do versus what the hara line does. The hara line is basically this hypodermically thin tube that allows the energies and sentience associated with the soul to come down the frequencies and connect with the body, whilst still being connected to the higher self or true energetic self, and not be affected by the changes in frequency, therefore maintaining the connectivity, albeit a very low baud rate or a very low bandwidth, so to speak. So we still maintain our connectivity, but so slow we got connected, instantaneously. So gut feeling is something else. Gut feeling is basically your intuition, which is clairsentience, and it's just a function of using the higher frequential level of communication. Daniel, do the archangels and the Elohim, the ascended masters, and the true energetic self have their own trials and tribulations like we do? They have their own functions to do. Yes, I mean the archangels are a different group of entities that aren't specifically in the evolution cycle. Ascended masters are those entities who, together with their true energetic selves, have moved beyond the need to incarnate, and so they've ascended past the need to incarnate in the physical, and therefore they've mastered it. They've mastered the incarnation. So that's what they call them, ascended masters. But again, they have their own challenges in their own frequency that they create themselves to allow them to, in effect, experience, learn, and evolve in the way that they can in their own environment. Okay, so let's have a look at next question. This is from Bill. Do humans and other entities exist in frequency 4, 5, etc.? Are such entities aware that they exist in a particular frequency? The higher up the frequencies we go, the more aware of who and what we are. And there are humans in the 4th frequency, and there are humans in the 5th frequency. But clearly they're not as dense as us, and we don't see them. And we don't have the technology to be able to see them in the 4th frequency. Although some people can start to see the etheric, which is the sort of the first manifestation of the aura as a function of being a higher frequency. So in essence, that is also indicative of being able to see in the 4th frequency or the lower astral. So some people can see it, but they tend to perceive it more than see it, and that is overlaid on their physical vision as a function of the work and the functionality of the third eye. So are these civilizations more advanced technologically or spiritually? Do they still default to killing each other? Again, they will be more advanced. It'd be more mature is a better way of saying it, because they would know more about themselves and who and what they are than we do here. So the higher up the frequencies they are, the more mature they are, the more capable they are of being able to recognize who and what they are and navigate through their incarnation in a karma-free way. So no, the higher up the frequencies they are, that they will not be entering into any form of aggressive state of activity. Daniel, are you the only one here on this planet without guides? No, there are others. There are others, but they're not so visible. That's the question. That's what I've just been told. There are others, but they're not so visible. And there are others who aren't incarnate who don't have guides who are watching as well. Okay, good question. That's a very, very personal question, actually. Thank you. Jagjat, could you draw us a picture using the traversing of frequencies as to what level which entities preside? That would be difficult because there's that many different types of entity or body type that we incarnate into that you can think of even the plethora of different body types on the planet, from the insects to the fish to the animals to the human types and others that we can't see. They would all exist potentially in different frequencies as well. Some of them tend to manifest as being more capable of supporting sentience in higher frequencies than others. So I don't think I could do that. There'd be too many to do. Okay, next question. Protons move all the time. Is it possible that the parallel realities are just protons moving in parallel planes? After all, everything is made of protons. So a parallel environment that is of this particular frequency would also have protons. That's a function of event space. The higher up the frequencies we go, those levels of physicality start to disappear. And so we start to lose those components that create the gross physical. So we'd start to see things that you would expect to see manifest as not being there, part of the frequencies we are. But nevertheless, they would be reproduced by event space based upon our sentient entities, our choices. Does event space have its own sentience? Yes, it does. And if you read the books, certainly within the Origin Speaks and the you would see that it has got its own sentience, and it had the potential to be the dominant volume of sentience, but it recognised that the Origin, through obviously accessing its own functions, would end up being a more capable volume of sentience, and that the Origin would be able to move out of structured space into non-structured space and take event space with it. But to do that, it had to lose its own dominance, and so therefore it created a condition where it changed the direction of subsequent event spaces that allowed the Origin to become the more dominant volume of sentience because and then became a subset or a function of the origin as well. 4. What are the various effects of increasing frequency on the human body? Can you explain it in an increasing succession? When you're doing a traversing of frequencies, for example, you start to experience different sensations within the body. The first one would be tingling, for example, or temperature, or pressure around here. And they're quite pronounced when you move from the third frequency to the fourth frequency, but they can change from one to another, or they can change from one to having a number of different sensations or functions or reactions. But the higher you go, for instance, when you go past the seventh, you start to lose those sensations because you're into a frequency that is not affecting the gross physical. So although you get sensations initially as you move up to the frequencies associated with the construct of the human form, basically the first through to the seventh, once you get beyond that, you tend to not experience anything at all. Some people experience nausea, by the way, which is quite an interesting one as well. What is the difference between the seventh frequency at the human level and the physical world level? Finitude, basically. Oh, we've only got, looking at this, we've only got 10 minutes left, so I'll go very quick, or I'll end up finishing the questions off at the end on a separate recording. Finitude. The higher the frequencies we go, the more finitude there is, the more content there is. So when we get the seventh frequency, we will see the content associated with the first three frequencies, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, and the seventh, should we choose to do so. However, we're more likely to, and we do, focus on the frequency that we're on. So we've been on Earth, for example, in a different frequency with different levels of content there that are specifically based upon the seventh frequency. But as sentient incarnate entities on that level, we could focus on what's in the lower frequency as well. Number 6 from Jagjot. Are we sentient beings? How does sentience come to be? Who constructed sentience in the origin? We are sentient entities, actually. A being is a volume of sentience that's created through Darwinian evolution of the attraction of similar or same energies together that start to actively group together, that start to have the minor intelligence to want to seek out similar or same entities, and therefore group together to create bigger levels of energy with a desire to connect and to do various different things. And it creates intelligence, it creates awareness, it creates consciousness, it creates creativity, it creates sentience eventually. However, we're all derivatives of, or should we say, projections from an entity that was created by the individualization of sentience from the origin. Therefore becomes an entity, not a being. The origin is a being because it's evolved. And our true energetic selves are projections down from the source, so they're an entity, and our souls are projections from our true energetic self. So in essence, we're also entities as well. So the sentience in the origin evolved that way and was also assisted by the event space. Daniel, has anybody else ever had an embodiment without guides? Have all your embodiments been without guides? I've had helpers here, other incarnate entities, looking at some of the past lives. This is my 12th past life. This is my 12th life here. The other entities that I'm part of, or that I've come from as a group of, they've kept their eye on me. So they're not guides as such, but they're sort of lifeguards, if you want to call it that. That's the best way to put it. Making sure I don't get addicted to low frequency thoughts, behaviors, and actions, in a way which is going to trap me here. Okay, another question from Bill. If we ascend to frequencies 13 and 14 when leaving the Earth body, how is it that ascension occurs to the higher frequencies beyond 14? I presume our true energetic selves exist in frequencies higher than 14. If so, when and how do we reunite with our true energetic selves? They exist in the true energetic self tends to exist well above where we are now, in the third or fourth full dimension, and sometimes fifth, sixth, even higher, with some really evolved souls. And we would enter into some level of communion after each incarnation, unless we're doing a back-to-back incarnation, which is when we basically go into like a one incarnation into the next, into the next, into the next, if we have something we want to experience that is greater than the life expectancy of the body. So we would continue to do that. But in essence, we go back to the frequency level that our true energetic self exists within as a function of its own evolution, because the multiverse is both a metric for our evolution and it's an environment for our evolutionary progression. And we enter into a number of different levels of communion. That is in the and dialogues, the levels of communion we can go into, who we are and how we incarnate. So I might extract that as a PDF and make it available for people to let us know the different types of communion we enter into. Okay. Daniel, why without guides would it be seen that this would be a wonderful opportunity for many to grow and evolve to higher levels, working with you closely? Well, working with anybody who's basically trying to help the general population become more expansive and understand the greater reality and understand themselves. It's something that's I've chose to do. I've always had this feeling of doing something that's beneficial, and there's no ego there. It's hard work, but in essence, it's just something I felt I need to do, and others who have guides also do it as well. So I don't know really how to answer that question. It's just that it's just something. It's a calling, if you want to call it that. Next part of this: if they ever pull the plug on this work on this planet and desire to start again, who would make that decision? How would the decision be made? Is there a chance this happening? What can we do as your students to make it better so that it does not happen? Well, it's happened a few times, and collectively, those entities who are working with the governance of the Earth and the physical universe have decided to pull the plug and start again a number of times on Earth. Atlantis being the most localized one, and the creation of Egypt being the next civilization that's there. And it's a collective function that we all participate in. In effect, we work with those who are governing us, so to speak, while we're here, and we decide that it's going right or wrong, and we decide to hit the reset button and reboot again. And we wouldn't know. Basically, it would be like one moment we're doing one experience, next moment we're doing another experience, and we'd have no knowledge of the previous experience. So it's like reality is changing like that. That's how it happens. Next one from Bill. We've got 3.5 minutes, so I'm going to see what I can do here. So I think I'm going to have to answer the next set of questions sort of outside of this meeting. In our frequency 1 to 3, physical. This is the physical reality. If there is an end to space, is there an end to space, or is it infinite? Or is space just a construct in the mind of the source? Our minds cannot comprehend either, and why not? There is within the physical universe a barrier, and that barrier isn't spatially, it's frequentially. And so everything exists in the same space within the multiverse. It's just that the frequency creates the condition to have it here rather than here, frequentially. And so from our perspective, there is a level of infinity, but it's well beyond our comprehension what that level of, what the volume of environment is. But the best way to explain it is it's frequentially limited in terms of what can be here at this frequency versus what can be in the next frequency. So there's more content can be in the physical universe in the 4th frequency than the collective verse 3, and there's more can be in the 5th than the 4th and the collective first 3 as well. So we can understand it basically, but not in this frequential state, because we're not able to access the high frequency computational or processing capability that we've normally got when we're in the higher frequencies associated with where our true energetic self is. Question from Yara, and I might have to have this as the last one, and everything else I'll do later. If the elites, the higher ups, decision makers, etc., the Illuminati, etc., have the secrets and knowledge, what's the point of wreaking destruction and expending billions in their guise of goal of gaining gaining the same or gaining something? I.e., if one knows one is immortal, what's the point of wreaking havoc to gain immortality? What's the point of this happening? there must be some disconnects there where they're either throwing spanners in the works to see how we react. This is the Illuminati side, or they haven't really understood who what they are. They understand certain functions of being a higher frequency, but they've not made the jump to allow them to connect with their true energetic selves or their higher selves and understand what the greater reality is while they incarnate here. So it's a bit like being a magician. You know how to make the tricks work, but you don't know what's beyond the tricks, so to speak. And that's why we get all this destruction, because it's still a low frequency thought, behavior, and action. This question is from Daniel. Do you ever have dark times and difficulties? What are the things that you do to pull yourself up and get out of sadness, depression, or doubts and fears? I see everything as a challenge, or as a something I've got to overcome or deal with. So I don't see things as being sad or fearful or joyful. It's just what it is. And one could argue that I am detached from these different emotions, and to some extent I am. And mostly I am. And that's the whole point of being here, is to detach yourself from those things that connect you to the physical and would keep you coming back to the physical. So as long as you can still maintain and deal with the responsibilities you've got while you're here, then you don't see that if something doesn't happen the way you wanted it to happen, that you get sad or frustrated with it. You just see it as being, oh, okay, let's move on. Now, a long time ago, I used to rebuild old sports cars, old MGs, and I can tell you a number of times I would take off a panel of metal and see more rust than I expected, and then my heart would sink. I would be sad, but that was a long time ago, and since then I've been working on myself, and I don't get that sinking at the heart anymore, or the joy of seeing something. I just experience it in a thoughtful way, and but not a consuming way. So I don't get pulled down fears or sadness or too elated. I just experience what it is and sort of take note and record it and appreciate it. I don't walk around like a robot, but I don't go up and down in the emotions. I have an average, if you want to, where I experience things and I appreciate it, and I appreciate it for what it is. And it could either be maybe disappointing, but then I'll have to work on overcoming that disappointment, or why I'm disappointed, or if it's really joyful, then I have to experience and understand why it's joyful and work on it that way. So it is a bit of a detached way of experiencing things. Yara, also, is there going to be another group meditation? Hopefully, I was going to do it in December, but I have some questions to go through. Why not do it in January? That would be a good time to do it, because I'd like to try and do a meditation every quarter. So that's every 3 months. So January would be the next opportunity. So let's say we have a meditation in January 2024, with the recording being the questions and answer sessions that have been sent in prior to the actual live Satsanga. So let's do that. Let's do January 2024 for the next meditation. So from Yara again, how can I best imagine, stroke address, stroke connect, stroke commune, and approach relationship with God or source? Meditate. That's the best answer. Meditate. And you can use various different ways of focusing your meditation, or your detachment from the physical. You can do the traversing of frequencies. You can do Kriya Yoga. You can do Hong So, which is a derivative of Kriya. It's the younger brother or the younger sister of Kriya Yoga, if you want to call it that. But meditation, without doubt, is the most important way of starting down the path of being connected to source. It's cutting out shall we say, the distractions of the physical around us. Next question is from Bill. Why has humanity been kept in the dark, subject to religious dogma as a control mechanism until now? Why have you been given access to the greater reality now, not 100 years ago or 100 years from now? Well, I've tried to do this work before, and I got hung, drawn, and quartered in the medieval period. I seem to remember. So I have been helping, just trying to understand who what we are prior to this particular incarnation. But we tend to, all religions started with the understanding of how to try to maintain our frequential state whilst the earth was in going through a dip in the frequencies, or when we were encountering locally low frequency environments. And the issue is that although all of these different methods worked, but based upon the different teacher, for example, or deity that was teaching it, mankind got in the way as a function of dropping down the frequencies. And so, although the idea was to try to compartmentalize people, to detach them from the outer world, things like kibbutzes, things like ashrams, things like monasteries were designed to do that so people can maintain their high frequency thoughts, behaviors, and actions and not be involved in the low frequency thoughts, behaviors, and actions of the outside world. In essence, even these areas got affected by low frequency, and we started to get the people who had the information passed on to them to teach the students to be able to elevate their frequencies and be in contact with the greater reality, themselves not being able to do it. And so it became a control medium to try and maintain control of them, their thoughts, behaviors, and actions, rather than being able to show them how to connect with whom what they are and elevate their consciousness and their sentience beyond the physical, navigating around all of the addictive possibilities that are here, all the karmic possibilities are here. So low frequencies of mankind got in the way, basically. And that's why we are where we are now. And, we're going through little dips, but there are lots of other people who are assisting as well, not just me. There's all those individuals as well around the world who've done before me and will do it afterwards as well to help create the condition where we start to be in a more mature way and exist within a more mature way and interact with each other and the environment in a more mature way. Okay, so there's a few other comments here. Okay, Daniel said, when we encounter you in spirit, will we recognize you and Dan? If it's appropriate. It's also quite possible that you might create your own environments where you do experience that. Lots of people do it. If they get immersed in a particular thought process, rather than being open-minded and expansive, they will create what they expect to see when they've moved out of this particular physicality. Because we can do that in the higher frequency. We can create our own environments. We can create what we expect to see. So people will see angels. They might see Muhammad. They might see the Buddha. They may see Jesus. They may see Uncle Tom. They may see, their favorite pet. Sometimes this does happen, but in reality, what happens is the guides help us move on beyond this creation of this illusion around us and move us back into where we should be. So they do help us move on from that perspective. Okay, from Daniel again. Do the white children have guides? Yes, they will have guides to help them navigate around their incarnation and not accrue karma. That will be a very important thing. So they'll be given, and they'll be put in places and locations and circumstances where they can maximize their time here as well. And you can see that with Greta Thunberg, for example, with the soul that was in the body that allowed it to gestate and become the young girl isn't the soul that's in there now. The soul that's in there now is a walk-in that elected to enter into a body that was virtually mature first, rather than go through the challenges of interacting with the body in the gestation stage, and then the birth stage, and then go through the infant stage, etc., etc. Next question is from Lekan. Do people who reach a high enough level of spirituality experience the flow state continuously? Yes. I mean, going with the flow is important. I mean, I feel the flow state, and others, other people can as well. It's recognizing when things are happening the way they should be, and if you try to push it, you can, cause a ripple, so that being in the flow doesn't actually happen. Or if you go too slow, you can also cause a ripple. It's a bit like having somebody who's supposed to be opening a certain number of doors for you. If you're if you arrive at a door before the person who's got the key gets there, you get frustrated because you can't open the door. So you walk away in frustration. The keymaster comes in, opens the door, and you've missed the opportunity. If you get there too late, the keymaster comes in, opens the door, and he closes the door behind him, and you got there too late, you missed your opportunity. The objective is to use your intuition, your gut feeling as to what to do, when to do it within the circumstances you find yourself in. And then you'll start to go with the flow, which is very important. From Daniel, do all aliens have guides? Depending on their frequential level, yes, because aliens are simply us in different bodies. They're just different locations in the physical universe that have a different environmental condition that's resulted in a different body type being predominantly evolved or manifested or created. So from that perspective, it's important to recognize that there aren't actually any aliens as such. It's just us in different bodies. It's like us in different clothes. So they will also have guides. But if they're really high frequency, and they've come here to help, then again they're probably going to have guides to more likely to be lifesavers to help them not become addicted to low frequency thoughts, behaviors, and actions. But depending on the frequency they're at, they'll have some level of frequency protection as well to stop them being affected by the low frequencies associated with the gross physical aspect of the physical universe. This is from I. How can we move past self-judgment? Does self-judgment limit us? It does actually. What we should do is be in a state of self-observation rather than judgment. So if we can observe ourselves using the observer self, which was developed by Susan and Donovan Stasanga, who also interacted with John and Eva Pirakos and Barbara Brennan, then we can start to recognize what we are doing wrong, what we're doing right. And rather than chastising ourselves or telling ourselves off or being judgmental about ourselves, we can elect to change the direction or the way in which we act. And so we're not being judgmental, we're being observational. And then we can start to change our reaction or action depending upon how we think it should be made in an optimal sense, the better sense, when we're reintroduced to this different circumstance or this similar circumstance within an environment with certain individuals. Okay, last question, which is from Bill. Will it take humanity another 1,000 years to fully accept the greater reality versus religious dogma? We'll start to move beyond it, depending upon how we mature, and where we are right now around the world is a big it's a big sort of alarm call, really. So we could start to see it all round about 150 years time, and about 500 years time we'll be moving well beyond it, because we'll be a higher frequency, and we will start to move beyond the need for religion. Although won't stop people practicing it, but they'll understand that it's a function rather than who and what they are, and they'll still start to be able to use true ways of allowing them to become more connected. And of course, if we're all higher frequency anyway, because we become more mature and stop fighting each other, and start helping each other, and stop destroying the environment, and start being more mature and not materialistic, then we'll start to see who and what we are. Because as we rise to the frequencies, our communicative bandwidth increases as well, and therefore, as a result of that, we will start to move beyond the need for basically old thinking processes, because we'll naturally work together in communion rather than be forced together in communion. Great questions. Thank you very, very much for all of you. Namaste to you all, and God's love to you all. And I'm looking forward to working with you again in a month's time.
Welcome to the meditation, which is going to be based upon the ego. Now, the lecture was on the ego. It explained how the incarnation process creates the ego, and how ultimately patient, sly and determined it is to maintain its own should we say, status or control of us whilst we're here. Specifically, as it's a temporary condition, a temporary personality that's created by the almost total, but not quite total, isolation of the sentience that we call the aspect or the soul from the true energetic self, whilst occupying a low frequency, in this instance, biological vehicle to navigate around the environment that is the physical universe at this particular location. So let's just close our eyes. Let your feet flat on the floor, back straight, neck straight, hands palm uppermost on your upper thighs. And your eyes closed but gently focused on the origin of the spiritual third eye, in between the eyebrows and above the bridge of the nose. So I want you to just relax for a moment. And the best way to work on the ego or observe the function of the ego is to adopt something called the observer self. This is something that Susan Stasanga and Donovan Stasanga worked on in a book called The Undefended Self. They were one of a trio of individuals and groups that worked around the 70s and 80s to elevate the overall frequential progression in a scientific way of people who wanted to be healers, or just wanted to progress and think, behave and act in high frequency ways. They worked with Dr. John and Eva Periakos in New York, and they also worked with Barbara Brennan. So they created the psycho-spiritual introspection, whereas Barbara worked on creating a structured method of energy and vibrational healing. John Periakos created a way of observing the human aura by using a series of filters, glass filters, and eventually was able to see the human aura itself and use that as a method of diagnosing issues. And Eva Periakos was a channeler who was also in connection with or contact with Source. Her main book or contribution was Surrender to God Within, an excellent book. Okay, so just relax. Consider yourself as not being yourself. Consider yourself as being an observer of somebody. So think of yourself, if you can, position yourself outside of your body, looking at you, looking at your body. You can consider a mirror if you want to, and just consider the thoughts, behaviours and actions that part of you is having, but as a different individual. So you're doing it in an impartial way, a non-judgmental way, simply an observational way. Look at the things that you would consider to be low frequency. Has anybody hurt your pride? Has anybody suggested you're not good enough? Is anybody trying to belittle you? Has anybody given somebody a role that you liked to do to somebody else? Has that person done a worse job than you, but has got more praise than you for doing it? All of these things and more, the list is not exhaustive, are in effect ways in which the ego is affected and inflated. Clearly there's other things like status, wealth, material desires, jealousy, that are also used as well by the ego. But just look at those things within you. Look at how you interact with other individuals. Look at the way you interact with your work colleagues. Look at the way you react with your friends, family. Yeah. Do you find yourself jostling for position in terms of who's the favourite in your family? Or who is considered to be the blue-eyed person in your job of work? Who's getting the promotions? Or do you feel that you're unlucky and that other people have been born with a silver spoon in their mouth, or they're always lucky and get the best jobs, or they're always making money, or they're always driving around in a smart car, they've always got a nice house, they've always got lots of money? Are these people happy? Why are you jealous of them? There are times when even the most spiritual people get affected by the ego. It can come from nowhere, using just the slightest chink in our armour to sneak in there and start to make us feel depressed, anxious, lonely, annoyed, jealous, fed up. Rubbished, not listened to, ignored. See if you can see all those times as the non-judgmental, patient observer self looking at you in a non-judgmental way. Yeah, just as if you are actually somebody else. Because in this instance, you are somebody else. You're not what you are normally. See the things that you recognize as being the workings of the ego. Make a mental note, or if you want to, you can take a piece of paper and a pencil or a pen and make a note of what you spotted and write it down. And then next time you have these emotions rising to the surface, recognize them as being part of the function of the ego, trying to stop your spiritual progression by making you feel low frequency thoughts and the subsequent behaviours, possible actions as well. The ego can make us behave like a petulant child, always screaming not fair, always wanting reward, whether it's verbal reward or physical reward. Wanting to be noticed, wanting to be the person in the limelight. The current state of the earth right now is that everybody wants to be a celebrity. Everybody wants to be famous for being famous. Being on reality TV shows, for example. Or seeing what people who've actually worked very hard to achieve have got and wanting it ourselves. The jealousy comes in. Why have they got it, not me? I can have it. But they've worked very hard. And maybe you don't understand how they've worked hard. All we see is the end product, generally. Make your mental notes of all these different things that press your buttons, get your goat, make you angry or annoyed. Write them down. If you can't make a mental note or you have difficulty in remembering. Then as you write each of them down, consider that you're flicking an off switch for each of those aspects of potential egoic control. Moving you away from wanting to or even being the big shot, the person everybody looks up to, the celebrity, the leader, the authority figure, the wealthy individual. And move into a neutral zone where you're just a soul in a body, experiencing, learning and evolving and navigating through this incarnation in the best way they can do without accruing karma. And the ego will help us accrue karma, that is for sure. As you've made these notes and flicked off the switches, be aware that these switches can be turned back on again by very minute reactions. Somebody might say something or do something, and that switch comes back on again. Try to avoid being pulled into the competition game. Try to avoid being distracted by what others have got, how they're always rewarded verbally or physically. These are just material things, ways of making us addicted to being here, achieving status. Another way of gaining karma. Addiction to low frequency thoughts, behaviours and actions, and that which is only available to us in these low frequencies of the physical universe. Be calm, collected, serene if you like. Always deal with your responsibilities in a robust, repeatable and skillful way. Not requesting reward or praise, but simply knowing that when you do these works, the reward will be your evolution level. You'll be coming closer to source. So know that the work that you do without human physical reward or praise is being rewarded by evolution. Evolutionary progression. So there's no such thing as doing nothing is unrewarding, as long as you are doing that which you are supposed to do in your current incarnation, but you're also understanding how to navigate around the circumstances supported by this environment in a way which is not attracting karma, not attracting low frequency thoughts, behaviors and actions, not invoking the ego, using the observer self to act as a sanctuary, a guard on your psycho-spiritual thought processes, to let you know when the ego is about to rise and take the advantage. Because it's when we think we're at our strongest is when actually we're at our weakest, and the ego will sneak in the back door, through the chink in the armour, through the keyhole in the door, or the slightly open window. As I said in the lecture, we never really defeat the ego, because the ego is a function of our incarnation, but we can certainly recognise how it functions and its traits and keep it at bay as much as we can do, doing everything we can to not let it and its thought processes that it evokes upon us make us think, behave and act in low frequency ways and seek solace in those low frequency ways, or seek other individuals out to concur or be complicit our thoughts, behaviours and actions being low frequency. Try to work on a function of the ego every day. Try to observe yourself getting annoyed, getting wound up, getting frustrated, getting impatient, getting angry, getting jealous, getting anxious, getting depressed. Observe yourself every second of the day. It'll seem like a very hard job at first, but you'll soon get to it. Every time you're about to answer something, just think, am I trying to get one up on somebody, or be shown in a different light by the way I'm answering this question? If the answer is yes, then change the way you answer it, so it's creating a neutral condition. If the answer is no, then continue with the answer that you were going to give, or the way you're going to interact with others as well. Just stay where you are for a moment. Let's just be in this state of beingness where we're observing this other entity, which is us in our bodies, from the observer self perspective, non-judgmental, simply recording, giving us the chance to observe the recordings or the notes that we create as little milestones or little rungs on a ladder to help us recognise on a day-by-day basis, hour by hour, minute by minute, second by second basis in which the ego is working around us, and do our best to navigate around it, head it off at the pass, whilst always looking behind us. So slowly come back into the room, slowly open your eyes, take a drink of water to help ground you, and try to be observant of the ego rising within you, taking the advantages, getting you into that angry, egotistical position when actually you don't need to be. Okay, thank you for participating in this World Satsanga in November, on November the 24th, which is a Friday, I believe, rather than a Wednesday because of personal commitments. springing up from nowhere. And it'll be back on Wednesday as normal in December. So namaste to you all, God's love to you all, and be observant. Did you see the aliens in Crete?